churches, Tyler and Bursch. Jen is the Bursch and Tyler and Bursch, and she's really taken this on. And then I'm here at ChurchWest. I'm the president of ChurchWest. This is just general advice. It's not specific tax or specific legal advice for you, but I think it's pretty authoritative, and I think you'll also find it something that you can act on later on in your ministry. If you have questions that come up, if you want to pop those in to the chat or the Q&A, please let us know, and if I know they're coming up later, we'll address them later on. And we'll also be sending out the slide deck to everybody as well, and I think we're going to send a copy of the recording.
I think so.
Okay.
And, I'd be able to.
All right, cool. There's Jen, there's me, so you know how to reach us later on. And so you've got our contact information later on. And this is something that we put together, and I'll come back to this in just a minute, but let me talk about the ERC. And I want to tell you that to date, we've worked with one provider, and I'll get into that, but they've had over 200 California ministries receive upwards of $25 million in credits. And so these are very, very real dollars, and it's we've got more and more that are applying all the time. People are starting to receive checks in the mail at this point now. It's not a loan. It's not like the PPP, and there's a lot of confusion about it, so we hopefully are going to be able to clear some of that up for you. Okay, first thing, what is the ERC? It's a fully refundable tax credit, and that's the confusing thing, and I think a lot of ministries look at it and they go, well, we don't pay taxes. So how do we get this back? It's actually, it's a tax credit of your FICA tax. And so, but it's fully refundable, and it's above and beyond what you actually spend in taxes. And so it's a greater amount than you would have actually paid. We'll show how that works. It was part of the CARES Act. And so when the pandemic hit, they came along and they said, hey, we need to help people out. They put together the Paycheck Protection program. A lot, if not the majority of ministries qualified for it, applied for it. Most have had forgiveness. You didn't qualify for the ERC. It was kind of either the PPP or the ERC. But both were part of the CARES Act. The Appropriations Act at the end of 2020 changed it. And what they did is they said, okay, for the Consolidation Appropriations Act, we're going to retroactively change it, and we're going to broaden the definition of who qualifies for it for 2020, and we're going to give you the terms for 2021. So it was really beneficial for ministries in California, and virtually every ministry does qualify. It's $5,000 per employee per quarter in 2020. I'm sorry, $5,000 per employee in 2020, and $7,000 per employee per quarter in 2021. And I crossed out in first half of 2021 because it was originally just for the first 6 months, but now it's actually for all year, all 4 quarters. But I think Jen would agree with me on this, that it's a little more difficult to qualify for it as we begin to reopen.
Yes,
So
I definitely.
Yeah, so I think that we can do it for 2020, and so you would receive that $5,000 per employee in 2020, and then $7,000 per employee per quarter. And most ministries have been impacted enough in the first 2 quarters, is what we're seeing, so that they're able to qualify for it. But we'll kind of talk about how that works. And I'll tell you who doesn't qualify is clergy, and that's because they're exempt from FICA. Unless you're doing your payroll wrong, you wouldn't qualify for this. So it's all of your non-ministerial employees is really the way that we ask people to look at it. Okay, makes sense? All right,
Charlie,
cool.
we have one question. Do you want to wait to answer questions, or do you want that now?
Sure. Let me pop this up here. We have one employee, our pastor. Is there anything here for us? You know what I do, Ruthie? That was the question that came up. I think I'd still look at submitting it because I think it's worth it to look at it. So likely not, but let's give it a shot. Okay. Okay. So if we look at the, like I said before, originally, if you had received the PPP, you couldn't claim it. Now you're allowed to do it, and you're able to look at it, and you're able to apply retroactively for 2020 employee retention credit, but you carve out the PPP funds. So you can't double dip. You can't say, hey, well, we had $100,000 of PPP funds and we had $100,000 of wages on top of that. Let's apply for the credit based on $200,000 worth of wages. You would have to carve out the PPP funds. I'll show you kind of how that works. Okay, so let me show you how you qualify. And there's two different ways, and this is what gets really challenging, is that people go to the first thing and they say, it says to qualify for the 2020 credit, your ministry must have had one of these situations. One would be that receipts declined by 50% in any one quarter in 2020 versus 2019. And so a lot of people stop at that, but it's either one of these situations. There's an or at the end of that. And the or after gross receipts is operations were at least partially suspended by a federal, state, or local government order limiting commerce, travel, or group meetings due to the pandemic. So Jen, when you've been talking with ministries about this and you've been helping them go through determining whether or not they would qualify for it, what types of things are you seeing that they can use to justify applying for it?
I mean, that's where in California, because the government said, hey, you need to be at partial capacity and then, you know, at times during that time period, totally locked out of your building, it's pretty easy to show that that is a partial shutdown to a primary operation. The only churches that we struggled a little bit are those that didn't abide by any of those guidelines throughout that time period. You have to have actually partially shut down, but it also affected missions operations. We've seen obviously Sunday school and that type of thing, programs that have counseling programs, churches that have counseling programs, significant ones. I mean, we've seen it across the board. It really can touch a whole bunch of different areas. But yeah, I mean, in California, and that's where it's important to note that you have to qualify as you go along. So we have churches that have, you know, in 2020, in the first quarter in 2021, they were shut down and then they just decided that they were going to open. So it's really important to kind of do the analysis as you go, but it still can, even churches who at points didn't qualify and at other points did, you're still seeing large returns. So it's still worth going through that process.
Now, Charlie, so one thing I think, and just to clarify, for my sake as well as our attendance, so it says experience one of the following situations. So it's either the gross receipts declined by at least 50% or operations were at least partial. I think that's super important for people to get that it's either of those, right? Because the 50% receipts may be a tough hurdle. You know, at least in my experience, some of the churches that I've worked with, if they had seen a 50% decrease in gross receipts, they may not have made it through the pandemic. PPP and other things aside, but certainly almost everybody experienced, most organizations experienced some decline in receipts, but not necessarily 50%. But definitely, aside from what Jen just talked about with the, you know, if you stayed open the whole time and just kept your doors open, well, maybe you don't qualify, but most of our churches experienced, you know, some sort of restriction related to the state and or local government.
But even if your ministry thrived through the pandemic, that does not prevent you from applying for the employee retention credit. You know, a lot of ministries did great. You know, we finally got everybody at our church, or just about everybody at our church, signed up for, you know, automatic giving, and you know, there were a lot of different things. We got more people in small groups. We got people actively engaged in church. We did great. We had the PPP loan that we had forgiven. We're in good shape, and we're doing fine. But we still qualify for the employee retention credit for 2020 and 2021. So you can do well.
It's interesting to know that, at least in the churches we talked to, not one single church has qualified under the gross receipts test. So we haven't seen one that has been under even 20%. We just don't see that. But still, most of them have qualified, and some of them have done very well. I will note that while they're spending the PPP, you cannot get the ERC during that time. So it's just during the time that you're actually spending your PPP money. So it's just that 8 weeks really for most people.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, okay, and it's $5,000 per employee. So if we're looking at $5,000 per employee for 2020, 2021, it's 7,000. We're looking at 19,000 employees. If you've got 10 non-ministerial employees, then I'll show you a little bit of the math, but because it's not this simple. But if you have 10 employees, you'd receive $190,000 back. I mean, that's really it. And Jen, I think that the preschools, we're going to see that continue through the third quarter. So the ministries that have a preschool, I think that they want to look at it because you're not going to be able to interchange kids. You can't have crossover between youth. You've got some staffing issues, and they've got government orders limiting group meetings, right?
Yes, yeah. For schools too, I think it's a little bit different of analysis. Preschools help the most, depending on what's going on with your school, and we're still seeing some restrictions there. So okay. It depends.
Yeah. So we'll keep looking at it. And I was at a ministry that you were working with, Jen, and they were keeping track of everything. And they had like a little note sheet, and they were kind of keeping track because they want to document it. We'll get into that a little bit more. So I'll show you on 2020. If we look at this, you had 2020 for the ERC. Let's say you have a bookkeeper, and they made $40,000 a year, an administrative assistant 28, janitor 12, office manager 50,000. These are all their non-clergy employees. In March, Governor Newsom, shut down the state, and so we were partially suspended in 2020. You need to consult with the local attorney, and this isn't a requirement to apply, but I think you're nuts not to speak with an attorney, because I think you want somebody that's going to interpret the guidelines for you and say, this is what you should be doing. I think you want to be able to go to the board and so it isn't like, hey, I was just talking with Charlie and Mark, and they said we qualify for this thing, and we got $300,000. I think that we want to do a little more investigating into that, and that's why we've got some help from Tyler and Bursch. And again, I'll be sending everybody all of this information. So you've consulted with an attorney, and then it says, yep. Jen says, yes, you were partially suspended in 2020. Then what you receive is it's a credit of 50% of the first $10,000 in wages. So you'd have to pay people $10,000 in order to receive a 50% credit in the wages. And so that's how you receive, and that's how they do the math on the $5,000. So let's say you paid somebody $1,000. Well, you're going to get 50% of their wages, so it's $500. But if you look in this situation, and this is an example where a church did not receive a PPP loan, so they're going to receive $4,500, and $5,000 for these 4 employees, so they get $19,500 for 2020. Okay. If we look at a similar situation where they did receive the PPP loan, so same situation, but you say, well, we've got to exclude those PPP funds that you had received, and in this situation, you exclude those during the 8-week or the 24-week forgiveness period. So there's some math here, and I'll give you guys the resources on where to have somebody do that math for you. In this situation, you carve out those PPP funds. Well, they're still receiving a credit of $14,000. So it's substantial credits that you're receiving back, and it's a combination of your taxes that you had paid, and then it's also a wage reimbursement for the difference in what you paid in taxes and 50% of their wages for 2020. We look at 2021, and again, I'm going to be sending this to everybody so you can go to this document and walk through it a little bit more. But if you look at 2021, it's one of these situations, gross receipts by 20%, so they made the income qualification go from 50% to 20%, and then they increased the benefit to $7,000 per employee. So there's 2 main changes, but it's still the same one, where operations are at least partially suspended by federal, state, or local government order limiting commerce, travel, or group meetings. So Jen, let me ask you this. If we had a mission trip that was planned for the fall of 2021, And as a result of government orders, so we've got a government order that says, gee, we can't go somewhere. Could that, or is that stretching it a little bit too much?
If that's the only thing, I think it's stretching it too much. I mean, the FAQs on the IRS website says that it has to be something that is a primary, and if it's just this little thing, so where that line is a little tricky at points. We haven't found a church yet that is that limited because of the breadth of the California restrictions, but that's where you're starting to get into right now, to be honest. I mean, we still have missions groups, obviously, that are shut down because they can't travel. So I've got churches now calling me that did qualify, saying, hey, I have this one issue still. That's borderline to me. And I just tell them, look, you can try, you may get audited on it, or you may, it's risky. I don't know that it's going to qualify. Where the IRS falls on all this stuff, it's a new program. I mean, this is a new thing, and we're reading everything as quickly as it comes out, but they're still releasing information as it goes, which is how all of this stuff has gone.
Yeah, I think the IRS pages are like about 103, it's about 103 pages long for the IRS guidelines. It's double spaced, so it's not that bad, but it's still a lot of pages. Okay. Yeah. Okay, but it's the same guidelines, but again, it went from $5,000 per employee to $7,000 per employee per quarter, total of $28,000, but more than likely it's going to be $14,000 that you would qualify for. So it's up to 500 employees in 2020. I'll go through this situation. It was, in 2021, it was either declining revenue, or they called Jen, and Jen said there's government restrictions limiting operations. And as a result of that, if you've got 20 non-clergy employees, it's $280,000. So it's a significant amount. Okay. So I've got kind of a side-by-side, because I think this is really helpful for people, that says, the different situations, the different scenarios. I think you can look at this on your own, but we'll send you links to the IRS guidelines and a few other resources. But so if you want to look at the difference between the two. But I think the key thing here is that, wages paid with PPP loans funds aren't eligible for the employee retention credit. And that's usually the trickiest part when navigating this. Okay. All right, now who's going to do the math? Jen does all of the math for everybody here, right?
Or no, I went to law school because I don't do math.
Okay. Yeah, I don't do them in our office too. I had a ministry call me up earlier today, and she was like, "Hey Charlie, how do I do this? And how do I do?" And I was like, "I don't know how to run my own payroll." I mean, I don't mean to be that honest with everybody, but I'll tell you, I don't do it. Jeanette, she does it in our office. Jen, I think you have somebody that does it for you. So we don't know the payroll side of things. Jen knows the legal side of things. And so I think the first thing you want to do is connect with Tyler and Bursch and say, hey, should we look at this? Is there potential for us to qualify? And they'll ask a couple of questions. And then if you determine, yes, we will, Ministry Works is a payroll company that was created by Brotherhood Mutual, and the reason why they created it was because, and Brotherhood Mutual is an insurance company, but they created this payroll company, and the reason why was because ministries were running into real problems. They had some liability issues that were being created. We had changeover of bookkeepers, and literally everybody else seems to do payroll incorrectly. ADP, it doesn't do a good job of it. A lot of people don't do a good job of it. I hate to mention them all by name, but there's one, it rhymes with ADP. Oh, wait, no. They mess it up all the time because they mess up the housing allowance and they'll do it incorrectly. And so that's why Brotherhood created Ministry Works. So they will do the math for you, and you don't have to be a Brotherhood Mutual client, and you don't have to be a Ministry Works client in order to work with them. And they'll walk you through this process. this is a little bit about Brotherhood Mutual, so you kind of have an idea that they just are working with Christian organizations. There is a fee for it, and I'm going to tell you that the fee, and it's on this website and on this link, the fee for it, and I don't want pastors, and I specifically pick on pastors, or I don't want other people to look at it and say, well, let's save the fee and do it on our own, because those are the people that have had the biggest problems with it, and they also end up not getting it done. I think you're creating more liability. But their fee is only 5% of whatever you receive back once you've actually received it back, and they cap it at $7,500. So that means that you would have to receive $150,000 to pay that full $7,500, which I think is a really, really good value. And they're doing the work for you, because what they'll be doing is they're going to be looking at your 940s. They're going to be doing the 940X, 941, and a 941X, because they're going to do 941, and then you're going to do an amended return, and they're going to guide you through that process. They're going to take all of your payroll information. Your payroll company may do some of this as well. And so if your payroll company does do a good job of it, if they can do it for roughly the same price, go for it. And the most important thing to me is that you're actually doing it. It doesn't matter where you go. There's nobody that pays us or do anything. I'd love to see it go into risk management or maintaining your facility and things like that. But there's the most important thing is that ministries do it. But check with your payroll provider if they can do it for you. And if you have other questions, and you just have a question and you're going to be doing it with your payroll company or whatever it is, then, and still go to Ministry Works. They've made a whole team of people available to you to help answer these questions for you. And I've been really impressed with what they've done. And for the ministries that have, like I said, for the for 2020 and the first quarter of 2021, it's approaching, I think, close to $30 million that they've been receiving back. I had one ministry that we've had a few larger ministries that are receiving 7 figures back. That's kind of the gist of it. I want to be able to answer some questions. We're going to pick Jen's brain a little bit and look at some of the questions. But so our next steps is kind of going to Tyler and Bursch, and I've got their contact page. You can put it in there. Hey, Jen, for your help with this situation, how much do you typically charge? Because it takes up a lot of your time and you're going through it. What do you charge for this?
You know what? We've been doing $275 for a consult, and it takes us about an hour. And we've just been doing a letter for free afterwards, just indicating that they qualify, so they have it for their records in case they were audited later on. So it's not a huge time commitment on as far as the legal fees goes. It's really just an hour for most churches. There's been some that are a little bit more complicated than that, and it's reached to a couple hours, but definitely under $500, $1,000.
Okay, so let me do this. If your church, we got 33 churches that are on here. If you guys do it, and if you call Tyler and Bursch, and what would you charge them if Mark called up and Mark said, hey, we've been operating full bore, full steam ahead, nothing has changed, and you said, gee, it doesn't look like you're going to qualify.
Probably nothing if it's that simple. There's been a few that have called that it's either been so clear on one end or the other that we just have said it's okay. But most of them, it takes about 30 minutes to an hour, because we also walk through with them the best way to kind of put your documents together to make sure that you can prove, if you were to be audited, that you qualify and what that looks like. I've done it I'm on the board of a church and private school, and I've done it for them. And I've actually shared the template that I've used with a lot of churches to help them get going. But I think that side is important as well, and we go through that.
Okay, and if you call Tyler and Bursch, and meaning that not you, Jen, I'm talking about whoever's watching this webinar, and talk to them and go through the process and receive a bill, and they say go for it, and you call Ministry Works and you do what Ministry Works says, and you have any out-of-pocket expense and don't receive money back, if you send the bill to us, we'll pay it, because I'm so confident that it'll work in everybody's favor, and it'll work for you, and you need to just do it. And if you do it, and if you receive a bill and don't receive any of the tax credit back, we'll pay it for you. And I know it's a promise that I'll gladly keep, but it works. You'll qualify for it. Okay. So call Tyler and Bursch, or go to the website, fill out the form. If you have questions, you can go to erc@ministryworks.com. They've got somebody that's all that she's doing. Ruth is answering questions about the ERC. If you want other articles, resources, things like that. If you want to fill out the application, Brotherhood or Ministry Works has a link that you can go through, and you fill it out and say, yes, this is what's been happening at our ministry. This is how we've been impacted by it. And you can just fill that stuff out. So, okay, here's one of the questions that came in. It says, we don't pay taxes. How do we receive funds? Mark, if somebody doesn't pay taxes, but they get a credit that's more than their taxes that they would have paid, okay, their payroll taxes, how are they going to receive that money back?
Well, it's a refundable tax credit, so it doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter the amount that you pay. It's refundable based on the calculation, so you'll get that money back.
You get a check.
Yeah, you get a check. Yeah. Now, taxes are income taxes and payroll taxes. FICA is part of payroll taxes. So if you're clergy and you're not paying taxes and you're not paying into FICA, well then you're not going to qualify. But if you're a non-clergy staff member and your taxes were only $3,000, but your calculation says $5,000, you're going to get the $5,000.
Yep. So you actually get a check back, and I've seen pictures of these checks.
Yeah.
So it's there's a worksheet that you go through, but Ministry Works kind of helps you navigate through that part. And I'll tell you where I've seen some payroll companies mess up is some payroll companies have come in and they've said, yep, you paid $3,000 in FICA, apply to get that $3,000 back. And they get the $3,000 back, but they don't go for the additional part on top of it, which is the wage reimbursement up to that, roughly.
Right. And that's the difference between a non-refundable tax credit and refundable tax credit. Non-refundable means you only get up to what you would have paid in taxes. Refundable means you get above and beyond if that's what the calculation comes out to say. Yeah. It's the same for your own personal taxes too.
Okay. I met with one ministry. It's a good-sized ministry, and their credit was like $37,000, and I was like, that doesn't seem right. And then we went through the worksheet together, and as we went through the worksheet together, we realized that the reason why was because they were just getting their taxes back. They weren't getting the other part.
Right.
So Ministry Works can guide you through that. Okay. Okay. So this is one of the questions that we've had is now that our church in California is allowed to meet without capacity restrictions. Jen, are there any capacity restrictions at this point?
No.
So you qualify, but you only qualify for first quarter and the portion of the second quarter, really, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a little bit overgeneralized, I guess, Charlie. The preschool, as we discussed, there's some other ways that you possibly could get through the second quarter. It depends on how significant those impacts are affecting your ministry, which is why we encourage you to call us, because it's just a very specific question to every church. But most churches, I think, when that changed, I believe that was in late April, when they lifted the capacity restrictions because the Supreme Court cases that went up. For the most part, it changed whether they qualify. Yeah.
And this next question is kind of along the same lines. And what I'm encouraging people to do, and even though you don't need to contact an attorney, it's not part of the requirement, I really think it's advisable to do so, because you, as the administrator, the pastor, the treasurer at the church, you want to be able to go to the church board and say, hey, this is the reason why we're applying for this. We qualify for it. And I will kind of bring up this one question that came up, and it's John asks us, what are the sources of these funds? It's a federal program, and what is this? He goes, where did this money come from? And it's and they understand is this government overspending? And really, yes, it is. I mean,
sure,
but it really is. It's I don't know if you want to call it funny money, Biden bucks.
Printed money.
I think I think that we also want to look at it and say that I think that ministries, we've been impacted, but inflation is coming.
Right.
It's continuing to increase. Yeah, it's hitting, and I think that this is a way that I think we can better prepare our ministries and be good stewards of the funds that are available. That frankly, our kids and grandkids and great grandkids are going to be paying back for years to come.
Yeah, I get Charlie, I get that there's I guess you could call it a moral quandary to some extent when you think about these things. But on the flip side of that, even if your church is in a reasonable financial position, these resources sure provide a lot of additional stability for your church or for your organization. And obviously, at the end of the day, you and your church, and maybe even your board or deacons have to make some of these decisions. Mm-hmm. But I mean, $100,000, $200,000, that's a good amount of reserves that, as you see, sometimes the rug gets pulled out from underneath you, from state and local government even, right? And that happened last year really unexpectedly, and so you never know when that's quite going to happen. So, I'd encourage you to go for it, but I do understand the thought process around it. But yeah, I mean, this financial stability alone that it could provide, even if you made it through the pandemic and you've got decent resources at your disposal, another couple $100,000 or $50,000, that secures a position. $50,000 might secure a position for you for a whole entire year. So something definitely worth thinking about.
I think so. So, but that's why I think we should have an attorney that is going to review this with you, with your board. I'm happy to help. Our team here at ChurchWest is glad to help too. Let's see some of the other questions. Are there deadlines? I think you have up until 3 years to apply for these, but the problem is that you really need to do it now. First of all, I think we need to be prepared if there is another shutdown. I don't know that there will be PPP funds again. I think it's good to prepare ourselves. But it takes a while because a lot of people are applying for this. And it takes time for you to receive these checks. It's taking 6 weeks to receive the funds back, sometimes 8 weeks to receive them back. But there's not, technically the deadline I think is 3 years, but you don't want to wait that long. Ministry Works will guide you on deducting PPP funds, on how to do that on the 941X form. They guide you through that. This is a question that came in, and I appreciate people inputting questions, but it says, I do not understand everything about the ERC and if that is different than the PPP. I don't know if we qualify, but would love to learn more. Trying to save our church money would be a blessing. And again, I just want to say that what we want to do is we want to apply for it, and we want to apply for the PPP, the ERC through Ministry Works. It doesn't cost anything to do something like that. And you can see how we can save some money for the ministry. Here's a question. Could we be audited? And I think that's part of the reason why I recommend calling Tyler and Bursch beforehand, is because you could be audited. And I don't think that you want to be audited. And if you are, I think it'd be helpful to have a legal expert that's gone through this, Jen herself, 50 plus people that you've worked with on this.
Yeah.
Brotherhood has been doing this for hundreds of ministries right now on the ERC. I think they're over 1,000 nationwide. So I think it's good to have a professional that's done it. And Jeanette in our office, she's really good at this stuff, and she's kind of like worked through it all. And I was like, Jeanette, we got to get a pro to look at this as well. And I'm sure she's right. I know she's really good at this stuff. But I want to transfer it to somebody else because I want to transfer that liability out of our office. I want another set of eyes to look at it and help in the event that we're audited. So,
hey Charlie, we have a couple questions in the Q&A. One of them I accidentally said that we answered it, but I'm not sure if we did. It says we are not a church ourselves, but we are in the Orange County Southern Baptist Association with our administrative office and a preschool at a separate location. Do churches only qualify? I think you kind of answered that.
Harold, no, I appreciate you pointing that out, but we're the Orange County Southern Baptist Association, you absolutely qualify. And the preschool really qualifies.
Mhm.
I mean, you know, both of you absolutely should. Everybody, the insurance agencies qualify, law firms qualify, you know, so it's available to anybody right now. Okay. And then I think we had a chat.
There's another question in the Q&A from John McCorder.
Mm-hmm.
What are the sources of these funds? Do you see that one?
Yeah,
We can
that's.
do that one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, we did. Yep, we've answered it live. But yes, it's available for everybody, not just for churches. And not only should the Orange County Southern Baptist Association do it, but every ministry in the Southern Baptist Association should do it. And there will be a recording of this video. The PowerPoint will be available. All of it's going to go out. Make sure that they're all doing it. Okay. Okay. I don't mean to nag everybody. You know, I just get excited about this. Because the insurance guys were always coming in with bad news, but this is like something that's really, we're like the ERC evangelists going around and, I'm doing an altar call at Tyler and Bursch. All right. Okay, could we be audited? Just interested in how quickly you can get it completed. I've started the process, want to make sure I gather everything needed. Yes, you know what? Again, it's if you have all of the data there, it's really your payroll reports, and somebody at Ministry Works is going to dig through it. And you're going to talk to Jen. Like I said, it's going to be about 2 hours. And then you're going to dump a bunch of data on the folks at Ministry Works. And within a couple of weeks, you'll receive that back. And then probably 6 to 8 weeks, you'll actually receive the money back. How does the federal government reimburse us for the amount of the credit? We talked a little bit about that. Apparently, to qualify, you must submit payroll registers showing payroll excluding PPP wages. And again, that's something that this company, Ministry Works, can do. And we wanted to do it for our office. We went to Ministry Works. Ministry Works says no, only for religious organizations. So we couldn't do it for ChurchWest. But anybody that's associated with the California Southern Baptist Convention can. This is tough. We've got a couple of ministries that don't. This is a question that came in, not from a Southern Baptist church, but they said we do not contribute the employer portion of FICA. Can we qualify for the ERC? Have you ever run into that, where they say everybody's a minister?
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Certainly. I mean, even if it's a small church that just has pastor, that might be it. But yeah, I don't necessarily qualify.
Yeah, I don't think that you'd qualify, but still, you may not want to call Jen on this one right away, but contact the folks at Ministry Works, because they're going to know payroll, and they're the largest payroll provider for religious organizations in the country, and they're going to look at it, and you might be doing something a certain way, or I don't know. I still think it's worth at least having somebody take a look at it, and they don't charge you anything to look at. You send it all to them and say, hey, do we qualify? They only receive their fee, which is a nominal fee considering how much they're getting back for you. They're essentially doing it at cost or even at a loss. But have them look at it and just tell you, what you can do. And again, the next steps, I've got this here for you. Call Tyler and Bursch. You can email your questions to Ministry Works, and we can help out as well. And this, I talked a little bit about ChurchWest, but this is our team, our folks. We've got people, almost 40 people in our office working with ministries, religious not-for-profits in California. Offices are in Redlands, but we're throughout the state. Got a great team. Mark has been here for the first time, meeting most of the folks.
Yeah, it's been great.
Some of them are nice, and others,
Everyone's nice.
they've all been great. We've been blessed with a really great team, and I appreciate Mark being here today. Even though I had some technical issues here, I was embarrassed. I never did that. So that's us. And you got Jen's information. Jen, anything else you want to tell us? Did we miss anything?
No, I don't think so. I think you guys covered everything.
Did we? Everything?
I think we're good.
We got it? We've got some hosts on the call here too. Any other questions that have come in?